Alright folks, welcome to the Kelt Show. Today we're going to be going over at least one video by the Study Gym, and the reason for that is that he just posted a new video. I didn't know that he had a series, but he just posted a new video on his channel not a day ago, just barely, and I was offered that video on my feed. I have not watched it in the least yet. I've never watched any of his videos. Apparently the one that he just posted is part 2. So we're going to find the part 1, which I've already found before starting the stream. And we'll play part 1. As you know, I don't play the entire video. I only play particular parts. I talk a lot more than I play the video. And I will also be playing a video on my end here. You're not going to be able to see it, you're not going to be able to hear it, but I'll tell you what the video says. If it is important enough, I'll have the video play and speak for itself, and then we'll address the points that we come across. So let's begin. This was the video posted 23 hours ago, and this is part 2, as you see. And so then I looked for all of his videos on the Celts. He also has a few on the Gauls and the Franks, which is interesting. The two of them together, we'll check it out later. And for Celts, he apparently he just posted part 3. And I didn't realize that, and I commented on his part 2, saying that I'm going to be watching it. But regardless, let's go ahead and watch part 1 first of all. So I'm going to put it on the screen just to show which one I'm watching. Wait. I want to leave the cover of the video first here. Let me open it first and then... That doesn't work like I thought. That's alright. So, the Celts. So this is part 1, 7 days ago posted. Let me copy this link, put it on my other screen that I have here. And I already have my headphones plugged in. And so let's go ahead and begin. So I'm starting from very beginning of the video. So I still don't have control over my own browser. Hold on. Don't know why I won't rewind. We'll rewind it with the mouse. Alright. So he says, the Celts. The earliest origin is known in southwestern Germany in the Danube Valley 3,300 years ago. So that is interesting. I'm not sure what he's referring to. I mean, the Danube Valley is where Herodotus thought he was, well, not he thought he was, but where the readers of Herodotus thought that Herodotus was placing the Celts on. In the mouth of the Danube River, but not 3,300 years ago. So I'm not sure where this date comes from, but let's continue. Maybe he'll tell us. 3,300 years ago was the switch from Bronze Age to Iron Age. So no one was identified at that point in terms of tribe names. So let's see what else he says. Oh, he says they were known as the Urnfield culture because they had their dead in urns. All right. So I'm not aware. He's holding a book, though, and so I can be easily contradicted. But I'm not aware of any academics publishing papers saying that the Celts are the Urnfield culture. But let's go to Wikipedia. And maybe it'll have a section on that theory, and we'll see who holds it today. And let's go to the traditional Celtic from the East theory says that the Proto-Celtic language arose in the late Bronze Age Urnfield culture, very late Bronze Age, of Central Europe, named after grave sites in southern Germany, which flourished around 1200 BC. This theory links the Celts with the Iron Age Hallstatt culture, which followed it from 1200 to 500 BC, named for the rich grave finds in Hallstatt, Austria. All right, so let's start with this. And it proposes that Celtic culture spread westward and southward from these areas by diffusion or migration. So the study, Jim, nice to meet you. I'm running the Kelt show here, and the point of this is not to make enemies, and it's not to confront you and put you against the wall. But of course, you're holding a book there, and books have not had time yet to catch up to the latest information about the Celts. And so by circumstance of your attaining yourself to books, you're going to be limited in terms of how up to date you are regarding the Celts. What that means is that I don't blame you, and I'm not going to be saying that you're doing this on purpose, or that you have an agenda. It's nothing of the sort. I'm not mad, and the point of this channel is simply to show people where the state of Celtic research really is, and to advance, to make all of this knowledge that people are putting out more up to date, because we're really stuck in this still. And as you can see, even Wikipedia is having to kind of preface by saying that this is the traditional theory. But of course, what this is a presage for is really that this theory is on its way out. And the paper that has clarified that this theory has gone out of style is called An Alternative to Celtic from the East and Celtic from the West. And when we go to that paper, which nobody shows here, when we go to that paper, we can see that this theory was supported by three main facts. One by Hecataeus, one by Herodotus, and one from place and personal names. The place and personal names ended up being too late in and around the Central European territories of Hallstatt and Latin influence. All right, they thought those would turn out to be the earliest and oldest names, Celtic names to be attested, but they turned out to be the oldest. I'm sorry, the youngest, and so they're too recent. For instance, says here we cannot assume that such names are ancient, and then it talks about the fact that the inscriptions from the Lepontic region of northern Italy take the use of Celtic in that part of Europe to at least as early as the 6th century, and also for the northeastern Celtiberian inscriptions, they begin no earlier than the end of the 3rd century. And this ended up being, let me see where it says this precisely here. Oh, there you go. So, thus there have been three main stages of scholarship. So first, the Celts were identified with Hallstatt and Latin cultures of the first millennium BC. That's the line of thinking and model that you're following, the study, Jim. And this model has gone out of style, as this paper argues. Then there was the discovery. So for some time, the theory that you're presenting here, the study, Jim, that theory was going on for a while. And then what happened next is we discovered these Celtic language inscriptions in the Pontic and Celtiberian coming up in the quote-unquote wrong areas in terms of what was expected, which then cast doubt on whether these ethno-linguistic Celts could be identified archaeologically. By that, he means, and it's through the paper here, that these ended up being older than the inscriptions in Central Europe. But we can find that... there we go. This is the place. I'll find it for you. So see, the southern Germany here is what you're talking about. So this started by the Celts and also de Jubanville, which we're going to find here as well. But what I was saying here is here we go. This was and remains a problem, for the picture is complicated by awkward evidence for eastward Celtic movements in the historical period. And these go against the supposed westward course of civilization. Caesar is adamant that the Volcae Tectosages had migrated eastwards across the Rhine from Gaul. And then also the situation with the boy. Caesar and Tacitus both argue that they crossed the Rhine eastward into Noricum or Bohemia. Either that or from northeastern Italy, as relates Strabo. Livy says that the northern Italian Celts came from central France. And then there was, I'll let you read this, but I've already covered this in another stream, this falsification between Taurini and Taurisci to kind of make the archaeology show an east to west Celtic movement. However, these are actually west to east movements. But I'll let you read about that, or you can go to my previous stream. Perhaps look at the point that Dr. Patrick Sims Williams is making here. And by the way, who is this guy? He's the current president, at least as far as I know, of the International Congress for Celtic Studies. Perhaps because assumptions about the westward course of civilization were so ingrained, 19th and 20th century scholars underplayed the problem posed by the Celts' eastward migrations. So the evidence shows that they migrated eastward from the west, not as your model defends. The insistence of Bertrand and Reynac, Darbois de Judenville, and de Celets that the Celts of Noricum and the Upper Danube were indigenous, and that a Celtic Hallstatt culture spread thence, or from there, westwards to France, is a good example. Their alleged written evidence for a Celtic homeland in Austria and southern Germany does not stand up. So now I'm going to tell you where that evidence came from. In other words, why is it that you're saying that they're first known in history in, well, you didn't say the mouth of the Danube, but you said southwestern Germany, and that's basically where the mouth of the Danube is. So that evidence comes from these two people. So now I'm going to go over these two evidences, as in the last two of the three that were the main supporting evidence for the model that you're defending, that Celts came from this urn field, and then later on Hallstatt and Latin areas of influence, all right? So this paper here argues that there were 3 main supporting evidences, and I already covered one, which was that the names of Celtic people in Celtic places in Central Europe are later, and so they're younger and so more recent than the older, more ancient names in Celtiberia and in northern Italy. And so because they're older, then that piece of evidence goes away, because we thought that we would find out that in Central Europe, because it's the original place, we would find the oldest ancient Celtic personal and place names, but instead we found the youngest, the most recent. And so that's one of 3 that I've already covered, just so I can situate where we are here. And now I'm going to cover these other 2 points. One is by Hecataeus, and the other is by Herodotus. And then we're going to be done with this with regards to what supports that current theory that you're defending. So the point about Hecataeus is that he mentioned a city called Nyrax, and he said it was a Celtic city, all right? And then during this time where that model that you're defending was actually defended in academia, which it no longer is, but of course your book doesn't know that yet, but at that point where it was in earnest being defended in academia, then they were hopeful that they could connect Nyrax with Noricum and or Noria. In other words, the territory and the city in modern-day Austria when it was controlled by the Celts during classical times. However, even the people that were contemporaneous, such as Darbois de Judenville and de Chelette, they themselves had conceded that this was not a good point, or at least it was based only on a vague similarity. So they were intelligent enough to know that these names could not be connected. And the reasons for that come from linguistics. Basically, you would not have these vowels become those vowels, and then also you wouldn't have the C become an X. And instead, they found a better match for that Nyrax Celtic city as per Hecataeus, and they found out that it's probably in Sardinia. And ever since then, we actually found a very close match to Nyrax, which is Nurak, and indeed this would become that. The C would have been an abbreviated form of X, and then, because this is later, I suppose, and then the U and the Y are the same letter in Greek. And so this is a very good match, and indeed the Sardinians have a genetic profile that is closer to the Celts than, well, I'm not going to say then closer to the Celts than to the Austrians, because it depends. It's a delicate situation in terms of the timeline, and then I think it would be a close match for who is closest to the Celts. But the point is, the Sardinians are within the same genetic cluster today that the Celts are, and so it's not strange that a Celtic city could be found in Sardinia. And so then now we've covered 2 out of 3 points, and so this point goes away because it's not related to Noricum, and so it does not provide support for a Central European origin. And so now the final point, Herodotus, he's the one that places the Celts supposedly in this place that you said in the beginning of your video, the study, Jim, when you said southwestern Germany, and then I completed, you said also around the Danube, but I completed that by saying around the mouth of the river Danube, where it starts, because that's basically what Herodotus says. He argues that, let's find that evidence, that discussion rather. Herodotus alone provided the French scholars with their evidence for 5th century BC Celts around the source of the Danube in Germany. So only Herodotus out of all of the Greeks and Romans. This is another important point that I want to make sure is clear here, the study, Jim, because we always think that there's like an enormous list of evidence around it and behind everything that these historians say when they put it in their books. Many times, though, many times, it turns out that the things we know are because of a single piece of evidence, and such is the case with this scenario that has become popular in people's minds, that the Celts were around the source of the river Danube in Germany, in the oldest report that we have of them. And first, let's see how Patrick Sims Williams puts this. Herodotus alone provided the French scholars with their evidence for 5th century BC Celts around the source of the Danube in Germany. Evidence which supposedly proves the Celticity of the Eastern Hallstatt culture, and by extension the so-called Western Hallstatt culture, which derives from it. Or so they believed, or on inadequate archaeological grounds. And so let's see what the problem is here. Unfortunately, all these scholars assumed that Herodotus knew where the source of the Danube lay, something that the Romans did not discover until 15 BC, according to Strabo. If you want a little bit stronger evidence than this for assuming that Herodotus knew, Herodotus himself says before those passages that he says it twice. I'm not going to cover it here now, it's going to be for another video, but he says it twice, that he's not aware of, he speaks of things that he knows not of, and he extrapolates from the things that he knows, and then on another passage he says that he basically is ignorant of Western Europe. So he doesn't know exactly what he's talking about. He admits that, and he's making a point about the length of the rivers. So let's read what this says. The focus of both passages in Herodotus is the immeasurable length of the Nile and its alleged symmetry with the Danube, which supposedly flowed through the whole of Europe to the Black Sea, starting from the land of the Celts, the westernmost people of Europe except for the Kennedys, and the city of Pyrene, which then Aristotle shows was a mountain. So Aristotle actually corrects Herodotus by saying that the Pyrene was not a city, was a mountain. But basically, we have this point that Herodotus is making about the length of the Danube, and so he needs to make the Danube start as west as possible in Europe. And so he wouldn't put that in southwestern Germany, because that only goes halfway. And he does say that they cut across the entirety. Where is it here? Which supposedly flowed through the whole of Europe. So in Herodotus, and by the way, I've covered this passage before on another stream of mine, and so that's why I'm not going to go into it here. But let me see if I can quickly find that I have a map here that then, this is it. So this is what Herodotus had in mind in terms of the river Danube. Of course, in real life, it's only half that, right? It goes from the Balkan and then goes west and then stops in, goes through Liechtenstein, then stops. No, it doesn't go into through Liechtenstein. It just stops into southwestern Germany, if I'm not mistaken. And so then this is the relationship that Herodotus is painting out in his paragraph when he's talking about the Celts. He basically uses the Celts as one of 4 reference points to try and position this river as west as possible. And so he says, look, there's the Kennedys, which are the westernmost people. That's in blue here. And then he says, adjacent to them are the Celts, and so that's the red here. That's who he's saying the Celts are. And then he even ends by limiting this area that he's painting by saying, look, there's the Pyrene. In his mind, it's a city, but then Aristotle corrects him to say it's this mountain range, the Pyrenees. And then he also talks about the Pillars of Hercules, which we know to be the, despite some discussion, which we know to be the Strait of Gibraltar, which is this black square between southern Iberia and northwestern Africa. So he's using these 4 red, blue, brown, and black reference points to put the river Danube's mouth as west into Europe as possible. And he's making a theory that he also thinks that the Nile cuts across the entirety of Africa the same way that he thinks the Danube does Europe. So he couldn't be possibly placing these Celts in Central Europe. He couldn't be possibly placing them in southwestern Germany, because number one, that's not close to the Pyrenees mountain range. Number two, it's not close to the Kinetes. Number three, whatever peoples were there were not adjacent to the Kinetes, and so they can't be these Celts, because the Celts that he's talking about are adjacent to the Kinetes. And number four, they wouldn't be in southwestern Germany close to the Pillars of Hercules. All right, so this was an attempt at placing the Celts as eastern as possible to try and make them do this westward course of civilization movement, for which there's actually no evidence. All the evidence that supported that had to either be misinterpreted, which will have this article criticizes the assumptions and misinterpretations of classical texts and onomastics that led to Celtic from the East in the first place. So there were assumptions and misinterpretations that led us to the theory that you're presenting now, the study, Jim. And but I'm confused how this only shows up once. Tendentious interpretations. On the basis of tendentious interpretations of passages in Hecataeus and Herodotus, all these scholars associated the original Celts not with Gaul, as might have been expected of Frenchmen, but with Noricum and the headwaters of the Danube in southern Germany, whence the Celts were supposed to have spread west to France and Italy. There's a place here that this is also a good passage. I don't know if you're going to talk about this, so I'm going to reserve it for later. But this is a good passage. But I really want to find a place where he kind of he concludes it here, so I can move away from this paper. He goes for the. There's no evidence. Let me find that. Hold on. I just it would conclude really well what we are going over here. It's not in the conclusion. For that, I think he goes. Oh, there we go. That's it. For that eastern homeland, there is no early evidence, as we have seen. Celtic from the east resulted from a circular argument by which the classical sources, such as Herodotus, were misread so as to apply the Celtic label to the Hallstatt culture. So he's making the point here that it's not like Herodotus and these ancient Greco-Roman chroniclers actually were locating and giving us enough justification to place these Celts in Central Europe and in southern Germany. Not at all. In fact, these had to be misread. They had to be misinterpreted. They had to have embedded assumptions. And then they resulted from a circular argument by which they were made to say what we expected them to say. In other words, we interpreted them in a tendentious way to get the result we wanted. Basically, we only saw that they were, in the case of these Celts in southern Germany, that they were in the heads of the Danube. But we didn't care what the point was that Herodotus was making, that clearly, because he thinks that it's in the westernmost point of Europe possible, the mouth of the Danube, he couldn't possibly be placing it in Germany. He obviously knows that Gaul is west of Germany, right? And so he would have to at least placed that in Gaul, not in Germany. So, but they didn't care about that when they interpreted that passage. All they saw was, oh, heads of the Danube River. Okay, so then the Celts are in the actual heads of the Danube River. But Herodotus himself said he had no idea where these things are. No clue. I think we have a passage here that shows that I can show you, where he does say that he has no clue. It's either this or 449. Here we go. And as I conjecture, judging of what is not known by that which is evident to the view, so he's saying that he doesn't know of what he's just going to talk about. And then as you can see here, he's talking about rivers. Look, now this river which ran by the city, blah, 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 blah. And then he talks about the Danube, which at that time they called Ister. So he says, for the river Ister, which again is the Danube, begins from the Keltoi. So can you see here the study, Jim? This is the part that the books don't go into detail because, of course, it would unmake their entire point. What he's saying here is not the Keltoi are where the Ister begins. He's saying the Ister begins where the Keltoi are. It's the opposite. So to him, the place of the Keltoi is something known, and he's going to tell us where these Keltoi are. Now the Keltoi are outside the Pillars of Hercules. So outside the pillars, that means west of the Strait of Gibraltar. So they can only be in Western Iberia. And indeed, they border upon the Canesians. Well, yes, the Canesians are in Western Iberia. And this is the Strait of Gibraltar, this black square here. So these Celts have to be west of this black square. And indeed, that's where people who call themselves Celts are found, with several different suffixes and prefixes. All right, we have Celtius, Celtiatus, we have Celtianus, and then we have the prefixes Conceltus, we have Arceltus, and basically, when we have that sort of variation in terms of prefixes and suffixes for the onomastics of a place, this usually means, I'm reading at the top of the page now, this usually means that these names are better integrated into the onomastic system of the ancient place in question, and therefore they can be regarded as its original component. So that means that the original component of the Western Iberia is the name Celt, because that's the only place in Europe where it shows with all these variations. This is just a sample of all of the evidence that we have. Basically, this is an entire document where it shows all of the occurrences of the name Celt in Iberia, and you can see that it shows hundreds of times. I have gone over on the stream the epigraphic database, and I have gone over the results. And if you search for Celt in the epigraphic database, this is the Klaus Schlaby epigraphic database. You get these 3 pages of results. On the first page, Hispania, which is another name for Iberia, or parts of it, shows up 34 times. Lusitania, which is another name for half of Portugal, the central part, is showing up here on the first page 27 times. How about Britannia? Britannia shows up once. And then how about Thrace? Shows up twice. How about Gaul, which would be Gallia? Shows up 6 times. So as you can see, the majority of times that Celt shows in tombstones, basically epigraphic evidence of people who were saying that they are called Celts, that's in Iberia. I can show you the second page again also, and it's going to be the same situation. Britannia shows up twice, and then I've shown here before that these situations of Britannia either are completely without context, or they are about the Celtiberians. All right? So they're basically not talking about some Celts living in Britannia. They're talking about Celts who came there from a military cohort from Iberia. All right. And then how many times does Lusitania appear here? 27 times on the second page. And then Hispania appears 25 times. And then Gallia doesn't even appear. And then on the third page, we have Hispania and we have some unknown place. All right. So basically, as you can see, this makes this believable that all of these Celt names are appearing in Iberia, and then specifically the ones that vary the most in prefix and suffix are appearing in Western Iberia. This is exactly the place that Herodotus was placing these Celts, and not the actual southern Germany that you just said in the study, Jim. All right. And so basically, as corroboration for that, I offer you this paper from the current, or at least as far as I know, president of the International Congress of Celtic Studies, which is Dr. Patrick Sims Williams. You can read more about it here, but basically I think I've covered the important parts of this. And also, let's just make this point because you might make it later. But basically, on this paper, he also says, he talks about against this idea that Celts was a name for barbarians. He says it's sometimes suggested that the ancients used the term Celt as a vague term for Western barbarians, rather as the Byzantines, remembering their ancient history, referred to the Western Crusaders as Keltoi, like Anna Komnena, or as the British referred to the Germans as the Hun. There is very little evidence for such vague usage of Celt. Okay, and so basically there's no evidence for this vague usage of Celt, and I'm just going to skip this point because there's details that I'd like to show better with another also excerpt that he has from a different paper, but we're going to do that later, not on this stream. But basically, here's some evidence for there being very detailed. Oh, actually, let's cover this because it butts into where we just stopped. But I don't care about this Ephrus thing currently. It needs more clarification that I will show later. In fact, in another context, Ephrus did distinguish between Celts and Iberians. So, for instance, even people such as Ephrus, who simply assigned Celts to the entirety of Western Europe, he made 4 quadrants in the world and put Celts in the western part because they were the most numerous or notable people in some way, remarkable at least. Even Ephrus knew that there were Celts and Iberians in Iberia. So he was only diagrammatically making this generalization, but of course he knew that there were other peoples in Western Europe. And even a century earlier, as we just saw with Herodotus, that's the reference that you're making, he contrasted the Kinetides with the Celts. And another writer, Herodotus of Heraclea, he talked about these Chalcianoi, as he wrote, but these are most likely the Celtianoi. It's a common thing that these ancient writers will sometimes make these small mistakes. He counted some other 5 peoples in Iberia, along with these who we may call Celtianoi, and then he also included the Kinetides. So we know that he's identifying these same peoples plus others. So there were very many peoples in Iberia, and the Celts were one of them, and by no means were they some name that was used to generalize these Western Europeans. Even some other Greek writers, and here he names many of them, Timagetus, Timaeus, and Apollonius of Rhodes, they refer to them as distinct peoples, the Celts, so they were not using their name in a generalized way. And as another example, for the Romans, in this case, not the Greeks anymore, but Varro, he basically named 4 peoples besides the Celti in Iberia. And so Celt was not normally a vague term. And by the way, I don't know if you've noticed the general pattern, but all of these peoples were placing these Celts in Iberia, because that's where they were mainly. The only time that Celts moved in the minds of these ancients to Gaul was when Caesar made his campaign and published his commentary and made the case for his gambit to take over Gaul. Then he had to make sure that everybody knew that it's because he's going against the Celts and so on, even though it was only a third of Gaul, by his own words, that was Celtic. All right, and so basically Celts were associated with Iberians. They were talked about alongside Iberians in many phrases. Celts and Iberians was a commonplace phrase to say, oh, these Celts and Iberians, the Celts and Iberians, Hannibal hired Celts and Iberians, and so on. So everybody knew to associate Celts and Iberians. And as you can see, even when arguing for these Celts being used as very specific peoples by several different Greek and Roman writers, we end up accidentally finding out that, yes, these Celts were very often associated with Iberians, okay? Because in the minds of the ancient Greeks and Romans, mainly they were in Iberia. That's why Ephorus placed them as the western quadrant in his scheme, in his 4 points compass scheme. All right, he had to decide on a particular people for east, west, north, and south. He put in the north the Scythians, in the east the Indians, in the south the Ethiopians, and in the west he put the Celts. Now, as you can imagine, the westernmost part of Europe, at least for these ancient Greco-Romans, would have been Iberia, that they knew of, all right? And of course, still today, geographically, that is the westernmost point, technically, of the whole of Europe, is Iberia, is some point in Portugal. And so I'm going to move on from this paper, and we're going to continue listening to what you have to say. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we are here covering this first video, and we have only been 10 seconds in, and I think I've been streaming now for quite a while now. And so that's how long we take to cover these things. But we're going to continue to see what else he says. I've covered a little bit more than what he's presented. I don't know if he's going to say if Celts were a vague term or not, but I thought to just cover that since it's part of that same paper, so we don't have to come back to it. And then now we've already seen that this model of Celts from Central Europe is no more. It's no longer considered valid in academia, and academics have moved on from that. We're currently in an era of what is so-called Celtoskepticism, as I have explained in another stream. And let's see what else the study Jim has to say. But basically, I consider that we have now already refuted by taking these three support points of this Celtic from the East theory, that we have therefore refuted it. And so I'm only going to make these other tangential points for whatever else he might talk about coming from this model that I might have to do. But otherwise, the foundational basis of the theory has already been refuted here by Patrick Sims Williams. And so I'm going to continue playing this on my end. You're not going to see it. And then I'm going to tell you what he says. So he says, then 2,500 years ago they spread over Europe. That will be 500 BC, but of course that was found out to have been too late for them to spread over Europe. And I'm gonna give you the study Jim, since, by the way, I didn't show here, but the study Jim, he says here, he says he's not teaching, he's publicly learning. I use the time doing my physical exercises to learn without any fixed topic, and invite you to join me. If I get something wrong, please notify me, just not all at once. And so I am going to have to make it all at once. Sometimes I take more than a video, like when I was covering a Metatron. I covered his 2 videos about the Celts by making, I think, 4 or 5 videos overall, and so it ended up being maybe like 10 hours of covering him. So maybe that's not all at once. And but you have gotten some things wrong. Again, it's not your fault. It's because these books are not up to date. That's why I show you papers. I don't show you books. And I have notified you that I am making this live stream. Let me check to see if you're like talking on the stream. Maybe, I don't know. Let me check on YouTube chat. No. And so basically, hopefully you'll see this later. But this attitude I commend. I suppose it is the right attitude to have, and it is what I'm trying to do here, is notify you that some of the things that you're saying are already wrong, They're already outdated. Academics are no longer defending them. We're basically reading these old books and thinking that they're still good, but they're not. So when you say in 500 BC they spread over Europe, I'm going to give you a better timeline. This because it's not tenable, that timeline that they spread in 500 BC. It would have been too late, and academics no longer believe it's possible. Plus, there's not actually any evidence of that spread. There's no archaeological evidence of that spread, and so it's not actually believed. But then we have this academic called John T. Koch, and he has a series of papers about this Celto-Germanic hypothesis. This is just one of those papers, and he has a nice timeline, which I'm going to see if I can quickly find it. I never actually know where it is. I know that it's somewhere in the middle, but I constantly refer to this paper. This is one, but then yeah, there you go. That's it. Yeah, there, in these 2 pages. So if you go to this page, and then load this paper, and go to page 78, this is the timeline that is the most likely currently. So as you can see, pre-Celtic spread with the bell beakers in 2500 BC. That's when the beaker phenomenon created Celtic and Italic. They didn't exist before. And then they started spreading to the places that they went to. In other words, the Italic Peninsula and then the western part of Europe. And if you want to read more details, I'm not going to cover in all these details, but then on page 79, right after that, you have the explanation and more details for what happened exactly when. And in 500 BC, it's the opposite of the Celt spreading. That's when Celtic and Germanic were losing mutual intelligibility, because Celtic and Germanic were mutually intelligible. Let me see if I can... I'm not sure. What is the name of that? Max Planck map. Just don't remember what it was. This maybe. Yeah, this. So this is very current. When is this from? 2023, July 2023. This is by the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, this paper. This is not the credit for the paper, but the paper is by them. And what they found, this is a ton of people working together, all right? So a lot of interdisciplinary academics agree on these results, is that the last two to split were not Italo-Celtic, as people like to believe. There's actually no longer any belief in Italo-Celtic, but I'm going to cover that on another stream. So that's also an outdated theory. But as you can see here, Italic spread first outside of Germanic and Celtic, leaving Germanic and Celtic together to split later. And that was the last split. So this is exactly what John T. Koch theorized, and he didn't even have the results from Max Planck Institute by this point. But that's what he theorizes as well, that Celtic and Germanic split the last, and Italic split first out of the three. And so that's why when you say 500 years ago they spread over Europe, the Celts, that's so late that 500 BC is when actually Celtic and Germanic were no longer mutually intelligible. So before 500 BC and from 2500 BC, they lived these 2,000 years with mutual intelligibility between their languages. It's actually because their languages were pre-Celtic. Check this out. From 1200 BC into the past, it was still pre-Celtic, as you can see. All right. And only 900 BC, when we switched from Bronze Age to Iron Age, did it become Proto-Celtic. And so when it was pre-Celtic, it was essentially a dialect of Germanic. Let me see if he uses that word. The entry of Beaker people with steppe ancestry into corded ware culture, Central Europe, caused the dialect ancestral to Germanic, which is pre-Germanic, to come closely into contact with the dialects or dialect ancestral to Italic and Celtic. But let me see here if he has another. I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure if he makes that point that they were. Oh, here we go. The high percentages across the board indicate that the Celto-Germanic element belongs to the core vocabularies of Germanic and Celtic, consistent with an early period of contact, before these branches had significantly diverged into the separating dialects that became the attested languages. And so, in order for him to justify the point of this paper that he's writing here, which is that there is this oversized, shared, exclusively shared vocabulary between Celtic and Germanic, for him to justify that point, he needs to posit that the vocabulary, because it belongs to such core linguistic area of semantics, then this is only consistent with Germanic and Celtic having shared an early period of contact before these languages diverged into the separating dialects that became the attested languages. So check out what he's saying. He's saying that before they became Proto-Celtic and Proto-Germanic, that they were dialects that had separated. So they were dialects of some pre-Celto-Germanic. And so basically, this is important to know, because this whole vocabulary also could not be explained if the Celts had actually propagated from Central Europe in 500 BC only. That would have been way too late for all of this. Plus, this vocabulary is all about the Bronze Age. It's about Bronze Age items, Bronze Age technology. So it makes no sense that they were talking about Bronze Age technology in the middle of the Iron Age, which would be 500 BC. All right? So there's no actual evidence, no proof to think that these Celts spread in 500 BC. No academic will defend that today. There's no evidence that they can prove. And you're not going to find nowadays a paper actually saying, oh, and then it's from some scholars saying, I believe that this happened because of this evidence. There's not that evidence. The evidence that people thought that existed, I just covered from Sims Williams' paper, was actually forged or misinterpreted or had embedded assumptions that turned out not to be the case. All right. So let's go back to your video and let's see what else, other points you make. We're still in 16 seconds. So you see, I love it that you say that they spread from 500 BC to Ireland as Gaels. And then this is more or less another way that people think that the Irish people have a claim to be called Celts, is because they think of themselves as coming from these Hallstatt people from as early, as recently as 500 BC, and that they migrated to Ireland. But no such thing ever happened. There was a migration to Ireland in 800 BC from Gaul, which maybe some people would prefer to interpret as carried the Celtic languages to Ireland. But again, this is just one paper that defends that, and it wouldn't be the date that you're talking about. But still, let me go ahead and show you very quickly here who these Hallstatt people are, because we're talking about these Central Europeans, and it's important to know who they are genetically. I've covered this before, but I'm going to cover it again, and I always forget the actual name. Yeah, this is it. And so first I'm going to show you what is the best proxy for these Hallstatt Celts, according to a paper. This is a paper called Evidence for Dynastic Succession Among Early Celtic Elites in Central Europe by Gratzinger et al. And this is from 2024, 2 years ago. And so he goes on to say, indeed, most Hallstatt individuals fit a model of receiving all of their ancestry from Germany like MBA. Okay, with one exception. So, just to give you the intro to this, to investigate individual ancestries within the Hallstatt group, we used the Middle Bronze Age population from the southern German Lech Valley, as a proxy for local ancestry. Indeed, most Hallstatt individuals fit a model of receiving all of their ancestry from Germany Lech MBA. So, if only I grab this and show you who they match in the modern era, then you're now going to know who these people are. So let's find out who these people are who were the Hallstatt group. All right. So we're going to find out by checking out the distance between Germany Lech MBA and all of the groups that we can find. So we're going to go to Vahadvu, and we're going to go to the download, and we're going to download, let's download all spreadsheets. Oh, but it puts it all in one text file. That's too bad for me, actually. Let's grab all ancient scaled and all modern scaled. Oh, they have a download all scaled, but the last time I did that, it didn't have the modern. But we can try that and I'll show you. But the scaled is the best. And so we've downloaded all of those, and now let's go to the tool itself. And we're going to load as source all of the populations. So every population we have, we're going to load them here. And so this is the all. And we're going to check to see if it does have modern and ancient here. So for instance, it doesn't have Albania Bronze Age. So it's missing all the ancient ones. But plus, these are not the averages, so I actually want the averages. So let's download them again. Modern scaled averages, and then ancient scaled averages. Yeah, let's just do it like that. I just don't trust this thing. And then now let's put all of the ancient ones there. So we start with Albania Bronze Age, and we go through all the ancient ones, and then we're going to put the modern ones there. Alright, so now we have the ancient ones and the modern ones, and then from here we're going to find what is it that the paper said? Germany Lech MBA. So we're going to copy this, we're going to paste it here. There we go, we found it. Germany Lech MBA. There's only one. We're going to go ahead and grab it. We're going to make that the target. And now we're going to go into the distance calculator, and we're going to click Germany Lech MBA, and we're going to see the closest people to Germany Lech MBA. As you can see, they're all basically Spanish and Portuguese, and then if you look closer and if you know a little bit about Iberian genetics, you're also going to notice that they're all Western Iberians. Now, how is Andalusia Western? Well, they plot along Western Iberians, all right? They plot with the Portuguese. Menorca is an island. They're all, everybody from an island is not from an island, so we skip because we don't know where they're from. Castile and Leon is Western Iberia. Castilla-La Mancha is not Western Iberia, but it's like central. The Pyrenees, of course, is not, so this is an exception. Valencia was populated by many Galicians. There's actually a paper about that they found the actual surnames or last names from Galicians in Valencia. So this was populated by Western European, by Western Iberians. And then we have, I'm going to skip Hungary here because this is early Iron Age, and these are Illyrians and the Etruscans, and these people are co-ethnic with the actual Celts, who are these Spanish and Iberian peoples. Asturias is also Western Iberia. Portuguese is also Western Iberia. This Avisa here is Ibiza. That's the island. We're going to skip because people from an island are not from an island originally. We don't know where they're from. Aragon is not Western Iberia, so it is an exception here. Terre de l'Ebre is I think some Catalan parts. I don't know. So it's not Western Iberia, but the Catalans are genetically Western Iberians. I'm going to show that on another stream because of their Central European French influence. They end up being like the Western Iberians, who are also more Central Europeans than the rest of Spanish, who are mixed with Basques and therefore more Western. Then we have Alicante, which is southern Iberia, also plots with Western Iberia. Barcelona plots with Western Iberia. Cantabria is Western Iberia. Galicia is Western Iberia. Extremadura is Western Iberia. Catalonia plots with Western Iberia. La Rioja is another exception. It is very much eastern. And then we have Barcelona again, which plots with Western Iberia. We have Murcia, which was populated by Galicians, and so it's Western Iberian, and so on and so forth. So at least you know that it's Iberian. These German-elect people were Iberian in genetics. But of course, your book didn't mention that because they didn't know. And also, if you know a little bit more about Iberian genetics, as I tried to explain here, this is actually showing a Western Iberian signal statistically more than otherwise. All right? And so we can say that these German-elect Middle Bronze Age peoples were the Celts, and also we know that these Celts were these Iberian-like people. All right? And there's a paper that found out that the Gauls were these essentially two peoples. So the French Iron Age individuals that they found in Gaul, they fell within the genomic variability of the modern day French population. So in other words, Iron Age individuals and modern age individuals of France are genetically a match for each other. And also Iron Age samples from Spain, that is usually Iberian as a general term for Iberia, and Great Britain, they also fall within the modern day populations from the same regions. And even the paper notices, makes the note that this highlights a certain degree of continuity from the Iron Age to modern day populations in Western Europe, which confirms previous results. So basically this paper here, trying to find out who the Gauls were genetically, found out that they were these two different peoples. One in the south was Spanish-like, and the one and that's modern Spain, and the one in the north was modern Great Britain-like. All right, and so basically that means that the Celtic people can only be one of these two groups. And since, as I've shown on another stream, we have plenty of evidence for the fact that the British Islanders never called themselves Celts and were never called Celts by other people, then by elimination that leaves the southern group, the Spain or Spanish-like group, as having to be the Celts by force of circumstance if we go by elimination, by logical elimination. All right, so there's many different ways to show that these Celts are Spanish, and one is through this paper, and then by elimination. The other one is by another paper that tells us that these German-elect people are the most illustrative, most emblematic of the Hallstatt, and indeed most Hallstatt people were entirely this genetic composition, and so they were entirely Iberian. There's many ways to show that these Celts are Iberians. And so let me continue with your video. We're now in 19 seconds on your video, where you say that these Central Europeans moved to Ireland and became the Gaels, and then moved to England, became the Britons, moved to France, became the Gauls. None of that happened, all right? The Gauls came from local peoples from the Bronze Age that then forged their own identity, and the same happened throughout Western Europe, as far as we can tell. So let me continue with your video to see what else you're going to say. Okay, so you say that they started in the Bronze Age, but of course very Bronze Age, and then they transitioned through with the Hallstatt era, we can call, into the Iron Age, and became quite good at making things out of iron. That is true, but also they were good first with bronze, as you said, and but of course this is anachronistic because we're not sure that they call themselves Celts when they were doing bronze, and that's one of the issues that you're going to find when you mention these things to people. But of course we understand that we're talking about these same peoples there, and so I accept that we can say that these are the Celts who are doing the bronze, even though we don't have a snapshot of time that at the same time they call themselves Celts and were operating with bronze. We only have that with Iron Age. And so we only know that the Celts were Iron Age peoples, and then for the Bronze Age we called them Bellbeakers more properly. So now you say that they came into contact with the Etruscan culture, the Greek culture, and the Latin culture. So then you're talking now about this Celtic art, the spiral motifs, and that they used it in art, and also when they were tattooing themselves with woad. Here there's a lot of confusion. There's three things that are being confused here. One is the continental Celtic motif is not that spirally. Let me show you. There's a sauna, and then that makes a good example. I'm not sure if I'm... there you go. But it's another... oh, here. You can see this a little bit better here. This is like someone imagines that it would have been painted, I suppose. There you go. So this is continental spiral pattern. Would have been like this. This is as spirally as it gets. Now it's a lot different, although it of course has the same basis, right? As the Irish spiral Celtic motif, which would be something like it keeps finding the same something like this maybe, but this is it's not a good example. Just keeps finding this triskily. It's just crazy. Don't understand why it focuses on the one thing. Wow. Wow, it's just... I can't believe it just keeps finding the triskily. I'm very impressed that I can't find this quickly to show you. Yeah, this sort of stuff. This is what I'm looking for. It's tiny here, but all of these, nothing to do with the triskily. All I'm saying is these things that look like a corded knotwork, right? These are insular patterns. They're much different from the continental patterns. Okay, so these are two different things, and then the third different thing, which I said that there were three, would be the woad tattoos. which these are not the patterns. I'm not sure that we actually have them. Yeah, but they would be something like this. This guy has the right idea. Yeah, these spread out things. Yeah, exactly. Like some symbols, they would be symbols, and then they would be some like one spiral, like on the man's cheek, or a spiral that comes down, like the man's shoulder here. I know that this is a Triskele as well. But the point would be to grab these symbols and then put them over you. It's not to decorate, it's not to be like this. This is too small here. But it wouldn't be, this is what I'm saying, this is not what it would be like. So they would not be putting these patterns on themselves, at least that I'm aware of. They would be putting these symbols on top of themselves. Like it would not look like this. It would look like this guy. This guy has the right idea. Or this guy. This guy definitely has the right idea. It would basically be like this. So as you can see, then they're the symbols. They're no longer this knotwork. And they're definitely also not this continental knotwork. So they're three different things. So I would not say that they're the same just because they're spirally. And also there's no direct connection between these patterns. So they you know, I guess you can say that it's a general Western European motif, but there's nothing that associates them with Celtic, at least not the ones that Ireland is making. Nothing calls them Celtic, except that they are done by these Celtic speakers. I've been through that evidence in another stream, but basically the whole reason we call things Celtic art is because they are from Celtic speakers. And so that only happened since the 19th century, the 1800s. And so because of that, that cannot be transported back into the past to then talk about the Celts that you're talking about. So none of those things that happened in the Iron Age to do with the Irish and the Britons can be said to be Celtic. All right? Because that came after the 18th century. So let me continue with the video here. I'm going to leave this image on the screen. And let me continue to see what else you have to say here. We're on 48 seconds. So you're saying that they valued warriors and poets. No, but then you're going to the Book of Kells already in 800 AD. So again, that the Book of Kells doesn't have anything to do with the Celts. And these people, even when they were writing that book, they did not call themselves Celts. They did not refer to themselves as Celts. No one in Europe referred to them as Celts. And so I wouldn't connect that with Celts. This is like the Gaelic culture, I would say. Yes, 800 AD. They wrote about heroes and magic. They organized the society in clans, with a clan chief making the law. So you're showing the book that you have been reading, and you gave the name of the author. I think it's Michael Kelly or something. Let me go ahead and grab that. So it's Miles Kelly's World History book is the book that you're taking this from. And then now you're showing me pages 210 and 211. So I'm going to read from the book here. It goes, who were the Celts? The Celts are an ancient group of people who first appeared in the Danube Valley in Germany about 3,300 years ago. So, yeah, this is where you got that from. The first Celts are known as the Urnfield culture. So I want you to notice one thing. the study gym. And this is something that even people that are curious to learn, they end up not doing it. I think it's a healthy habit to get into. It's to read reflexively. When we read this first and even the second bullet points, right? Now I'm on minute 137. I'm going to go ahead and go there. That's not it. So we have here the Celts are an ancient group of peoples who first appeared in the Danube Valley. All right. So, and then the second bullet point goes: the first Celts are known as the Urnfield culture. Okay. So, but do you see that there's one thing missing here? Why are they being called Celts? Did you ask yourself that? I wonder. And I'm not trying to be rude again. It's just one thing that a lot of people don't do. Because they go, oh, I want to study about the Celts. And then people just automatically assume and trust that academics have done their job. They've connected these things. These people are the Celts for sure. And now I'm just going to listen from this academic about the Celts. But he never told you why they're the Celts. And I suppose I can read this entire thing and we're never going to see it. And again, I haven't gone through this video, so let's see. I could be wrong. I'm going to go through over it quite quickly. From 800 to 400 BC, Celts spread across northern Europe. Northern Europe is where they spread, huh? They took over modern-day France as people called Gauls. I didn't know that France was in northern Europe. England, where they're known as Britons, and Ireland, where they're known as Gaels. Okay. None of that ever happened. There's no evidence for that. And also it doesn't cite any evidence for that, nor does it cite any papers. The first wave of expansion is called Hallstatt culture. Again, where's the evidence for that? It doesn't exist. Around 500 BC, Celts learned to make iron and came into contact with other groups. Okay. In Latin, the distinctive Celtic swirls and spiral was used to make weapons and ornaments. Okay. And in the Book of Kells. And then now, after the Gauls sacked Rome in 390 BC, it seemed Celts might overrun Europe. But they were split in many tribes. Some early Celts used Greek letters. That's true. Celtics were fierce warriors. Valued poets more highly than warriors. Celtic clan society was highly organized. Alright, there you go. So it mentioned Celtic several times. But it never told you why they're called Celts. Isn't that crazy? Like you read about a people and how can we even check that they're correct, that these academics are correct? Why are they Celts? It doesn't explain. Now, of course, I've already explained all of that in several other streams. And here we're just going, revisiting this to see what else is left to do that I haven't done yet. So I'm not going to go over the exact evidence that I have been before. But for now, suffice it to say, these Celts, the only Celts that are Celts are these guys, because they call themselves Celts. Nobody else is Celtic. They've been made forcibly Celtic by a particular strain of academics starting in the 19th century. All right? But nobody else called themselves Celts. These are the only guys who call themselves Celts. You know how tribes in Gaul call themselves the Aedui, the Sequani, the Helvetii, and so on? Well, the tribes who call themselves Celts, not some other name, but Celts, are in Western Iberia. That's of whom Herodotus was talking. And so none of these other things can be considered Celtic. They were simply what their people were. So in Hallstatt and Latin, these people were, Sequani, Helvetii, and so they would be Helvetians, and they would be Sequanians. They would not be Celts. They did not call themselves Celts. So this word Celt is being spread around here to make all of these people Celtic, but they never justify why is it that we're calling these people Celts. Who are the Celts? Blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't say why. How do we know that these were the Celts? It never explains. So there's actually no teaching going on here. I'm afraid to say it's unfortunate, but the quality is just so low that there was never a link. It never linked to us. Why are we calling all these people Celts? It says, oh, they spread to Gaul, England, and Ireland. Did they really? Did they carry their names? Is that how we know? Did they carry the name Celtic to all of these 3 places? I don't think so. As we saw, the names that ended up in Britannia of the Celts are of the Celtiberians. So I'm not sure that this actually, I mean, I know that this didn't happen according to the best evidence that we have so far, but I'm not sure that it's as black and white as this passage is trying to make it. It's really delivering you this complete thought, but it has no thread to pull from to find out reality and figure out, oh, this is why this author is connecting the name Celts with these people. They never give you that thread. So I'm going to say right now, but this book is not a good book to learn about the Celts. Now, very few are. I can only name 3 of them, by James, by Collis, and another one that I'll name later. But basically, these popular books, and this is not about the Celts, this is apparently about world history, they don't have the information that the papers have, and so we are not going to be getting good enough information here. But let me continue to see what else you're gonna say about this. So you're saying, I'm trying to learn history today, so you're trying to learn about the Celts. So you're just going to read about this entire page, 2 pages that I just read as well. So again, none of that is true, unfortunately. Or fortunately, it doesn't matter. Hostile culture, as we saw that they were Iberians, which means that they are Celts. So you take quite some time on these pages, up to minutes 5, 6 at least. We're still here. Seven minutes, 8 minutes. All right, and then you start with the training. And so it ends here on about minute 8:47. That's where it ends. You just covered this 2 pages. And so basically, those are the points that I would make about this first video. Is that you know, these things are not considered true anymore. The supporting evidence for these things they're gone. And they were defended on the basis of assumptions and misinterpretations that do not pan out, do not end up being correct. So this is going to be the this first video. Let me go and check out your second video. This is it, to see what else you say, and then we're gonna go to the current video, but I'm not sure how different this will be because it starts with the same stuff. Let's see what you say there. Oh yeah, this is the same video. Yeah, and you go over the same 2 pages. Alright, so let's go to the third video you have. This is the one. And let's see what you say. So here you go with the one mistake that I often see. You say so when you talk about the Celts, you say there were the Gauls, for example, in France, and the Britons in England. But of course, I just showed you in the database, right, of epigraphic evidence that basically Britain and Gaul are the least. They don't have any names of the Celts. When they have a name of the Celt, it's about a Celt-Iberian. And so the names of the Celts do not appear in Britain and Gaul. They appear essentially in Hispania and Lusitania. I've already shown you that. And so 27 matches, 34 matches, and so on. And so basically, do you see how it's a biased presentation? Because the Celts are presented, according to your book, in a way that completely puts the focus away from the real Celts, which we've just seen in terms of genetic evidence to be Southwestern Europeans, the real Celts. But then the book you're reading puts them to be these Northwestern Europeans. So let me just be clear here and say that Northwestern Europeans are not Celts. They have never been called Celts. They never called themselves Celts. And they have a different genetic makeup as the Celts. They are the northernmost genetic pole of the Bell-Beaker continuum. The southernmost genetic pole of that Bell-Beaker continuum is made up by Iberians today and is made up by the ancient Celts in classical times. So this is one of the reasons why I have made this channel is people really like to associate Celts with Northwestern Europeans, because of course Northwestern Europeans are thirsty to know about their history and to know about their ancestors. But unfortunately, these books that have a basis on romanticist and Victorian mythologies, they end up conflating these wishful thinking that happened in the Romantic time for actual fact. And so that's why this entire Hallstatt equal Celts model came to be, to try and justify that mythology. But in essence, it was nothing more than a mythology. And so they were trying to acquire some prestige and some connection to the ancient times by finding a people in the Celts that they could connect to themselves, these Northwestern Europeans. But it turns out that there's no such connection. And I've already gone through the paper for that from Sims Williams. So the Celts, when we're talking about the Celts, the only Celts really are these Southwestern Europeans, the Iberian people, Southern French people, Alpine Swiss people, and so on. But not these Gauls, and certainly not Britons. All right, let's see what else you say. So you associate them with the Hallstatt culture. Again, we've already seen the Hallstatt people are these Iberians in genetics, or Celts, as they were also called. Goes to Hungary, Bohemia. Okay, talk about the style, the metals. You're citing a book called The Reader's Digest Library of Modern Knowledge, Book 2, Part 8, Man and Society. Written by C.R. Baddock and Hugh Joslin, Emily Court, Peter Loizos, Lucy Mayer, David Martin, Jacqueline Sharsby, Ruth Whithouse, J.C. Woodburn, and so on, et al. Page 448. All right, so let's go to that page and put it on the screen here. Minute 144. Thereabouts. So let's read this. Celts, warlike people, skilled in ironworking, who dominated much of Central and Western Europe from about 650 BC until their conquest by the Romans. But this you just read on the video. They were organized into different tribes, such as the Gauls and Galatians. All right. So it tries to tell us that the Celts were like this umbrella term, and then below that were Gauls and Galatians. No such thing. If it were, where is the evidence for that? Why doesn't it tell us? So this is not true. The Celts are not a grouping of Gauls and Galatians. They are all different peoples. And Gauls was not a word in the classical times. The Greeks and the Romans were not talking about Gauls. They were talking about Gallians for the Romans and Galatians for the Greeks. Those are the words that end up being translated as Gauls. But Gaul is a medieval age term. It's not a classical times term, all right? But sometimes we say that as a shortcut for Galatian or Gallian. But they never said Gauls, okay? And so you always have to be very suspicious of some sort of source that you're reading that tells you that Celts and Gauls had anything to do with each other, because they didn't. Gauls is how we call these Gallian people in Gallia. That's why it was, Gallia Narbonensis, Gallia Lugdunensis, and so on and so on. That's why the countries were called Gallia, because the people were Gallians. They were not Gauls, all right? And then let me read the part here on the right. In some places, the culture of the Celts was linked to that of Hallstatt. Yes, in some places, because in others it wasn't. And so then they weren't Hallstatt in the other places. And so this is the failure of trying to connect them with Hallstatt, because that the Hallstatt people were Celts does not mean that all the Celts were only Hallstatt. It doesn't mean that. It just means that they were using that material culture. All right? And so it doesn't make them, how do we say? The word is just escaping me. It doesn't make them exclusively Hallstatt. Okay? It just means that they also used Hallstatt, and they also used other technologies. Wherever they were, they used the technology that reached that place, or where that was produced in that place. All right? Okay, so it doesn't talk much about the Celts here. This is not a very good source about them. I would not take this source into consideration. It doesn't mention anything good. It doesn't link to anything that you could verify yourself. It's just very much these vague commonplaces. Oh, they are very warlike. What does that mean? They weren't warlike. They were trying to defend themselves, right, from other peoples. And also to acquire more territory. Everybody was doing that. That was the name of the game at that time. Let's see what else you talk about. It says that the chief center of the culture was in Bohemia. Again, nobody in Bohemia called themselves Celts. The people calling themselves Celts are in Western Iberia, not in Bohemia. So there were no Celts there. This is what you mean to say that academics are saying today is that they were Celtic speakers. That does not make them Celts. Celtic speaker is a name that we came up with arbitrarily ever since the 1500s to call some peoples, and then ever since the 1700s to call these names, these language groups that we call today Celtic. But they were not calling themselves Celtic. If you take a time machine and you go to Norica, right, or Austria back then you ask these people, are you the Celts? They would say, no, we're the Noricum. We're the Noriki people. And the Celts are in Iberia, in the western part of it. Talks about the characteristics of the culture, iron swords, wagon burials, and so on. That's not the focus of this stream. To me, what's important is to find out who the Celts were in terms of who called themselves Celts, not necessarily their technology at this moment. So I'm not gonna dwell on these tech things. Doesn't really matter. These technologies do not have the name Celt imprinted on them, and so to call them Celtic is arbitrary, and they're called Celtic because they are of Celtic speakers, as I've shown a video of John Collis saying that already. So it's interesting. So let me ask you the study, Jim, because you're reading some parts here. You see how they explain, I'm on minute 7 around. You see how they explain, like, oh, this is where the term Haustat comes from. This is where the term Latin comes from. But they never explain this is where the term Celts come from. Did you ever ask yourself, why is it that they explain the Latin and the Haustat? They take that time. Oh, the Haustat term comes from blah, blah, blah. The Latin term, a place in Switzerland. What else? Whatever. Okay, but what about Celts? Why are you calling them Celts? Where does that term come from originally, right? They don't want to tell you that because they don't want to simply show you this map. Where is it? Because then everything ends. The discussion ends, right? If they had to show you, oh, the name Celts comes from these people who actually call themselves Celts. And then we were just arbitrarily assigning this name to other peoples only ever since the 1900s. They don't want to say that because then you're gonna just turn the book. You're gonna turn the book off. It's not electronic, but you're just going to close the book and put it away because you're gonna say, okay, I wanted to learn about the Celts. I thought that I, as a Northwestern European, was connected to the Celts. I suppose that you're a Northwestern European. I'm talking about you, and then it wouldn't be talking about you anymore. You see, so because they want to keep this charade going, this gambit that they have. They want to keep on going, extending the name Celt as much as possible Northwestern word. And so they don't want to tell you where the name Celts comes from because that would undo what they're trying to do. Do you see my point, the study, Jim? They want to associate Celtic with Britain and Northern Gaul. But they can't if they tell you where the name comes from. Because then you would go, oh, these are Southwestern Europeans. They're nothing to do with Northwestern Europeans. So why are we using this name for Northern Gauls and the British and the Irish? We shouldn't be. I'm on minute 7. Let me see what else. You're talking about these spiral patterns after the technology and so on. Latin, Haustat. Bohemia. Material culture. Again, these things don't have the name Celtic on them. So the material culture have been named Celtic arbitrarily. They don't have anything Celtic about them. Chieftains in Austria, broadswords. Again, none of these have the name Celtic on them, so they're not Celtic. And then you give a summary again, saying that they came from Haustat, and then they went to England, and then they went to Gaul from there. Again, I've already explained how these things did not exist. There's no archaeological evidence for that. That's why your book is not citing any such evidence. That's why Patrick Sims Williams published that book to say that that evidence has never existed. It was misinterpreted. It was assumed, and it ended up not being valid. And so then you finish that video. You go into your exercise. I am going to go ahead and make a comment now on your video, saying that Hi, I just finished reviewing all your Celtic videos. Hope you enjoy. And nice to meet you. So the study gym, it's nice to meet you. Thank you for wanting to know more about the Celts. It just so happens that because you don't look Southwestern European to me, you're probably not actually associated to them. I understand that you're probably trying to learn about your culture and your past. I would suggest that the names that you go by would be... let's ask Google, because maybe it'll help me out here. It's going to be... what are the oldest names of the Irish? Be like Fenian, Hibernian. This thing did not understand it. Let me see if I can trigger the... yeah, there you go. No. Oh, but why do I put this here and then it doesn't... I was trying to make it come up. Okay, so then let's... try to make it easier for it, since it doesn't want to help me out here. Okay, so these are the names of your ancestors, the study gym. And again, I'm just assuming that based on your appearance, you appear to me to be a Northwestern European individual. And so the names that you went by are not, they're not Celt or Celtic at all. And I would say you should probably forget about that name in terms of trying to associate it with yourself, because you probably don't have anything Celtic. What you are is Hibernian, as far as the Romans would call you. They called the people Hiberni. Hibernian is what we could call them today. Of course, we know that Scottish was brought over when there was this Dalriada territory, when the Irish jumped from the Irish island, the island of Ireland, to Scotland. And then they formed this Dalriada. Then they brought the name Scotty there, but of course they were themselves, the Irish were themselves known as Scotty before that. So this is another old name that you have, is Scotty. And Fenian is another name that was also used to call the Irish. And then of course you have these other names like Eriu, Eri, and other names that are perhaps more poetic. And also the Greeks called you Yerni, or Euernia, which is also, if you understand how the Greek transliterates from Latin, this is basically Hibernian again. And then of course you have these more literary terms like the Milesians from the Book of Invasions and so on. So there's many names that you can find to associate with your ancestors, but Celtic was not one of them. They never called themselves Celts. On a previous stream, I have gone over several quotes about completely different authors saying to the same effect, the Irish and the British never called themselves Celts. They were never called Celts by any Greeks or Romans. And even Pythias, who visited Britain, and Pythias himself lived with the Celtoi of Marseille in southern Gaul. He visited Britain and said that they were not Celts. They were perhaps similar to the Celts in some ways, but that they were not Celts. So definitely, I would say you should not use that name Celt for these Northwestern Europeans or for your ancestors, because that's not the name that they used. If you were to take a time machine and talk to them about being Celtic, they would have said that that's not the word that they use, and they would have said that the Celts are these people in southwestern Europe. And again, I commend you for wanting to know more about your ancestors, but I would say the way to know about them is not through this Celtic thing. You're going to find a lot of outdated research. Any research that is still calling these Northwestern Europeans Celts is going to be outdated and is going to be talking about a lot of things that are assumed and even misinterpreted on purpose, just to defend a theory to defend this model that the Celts came from Central Europe in the Iron Age, when no such thing happened. Before I end, I just want to say that despite the fact that the Celts did not come from Central Europe in the Iron Age, and despite the fact that the Celts are not actually the Northwestern Europeans, but the Southwestern Europeans, and so despite those facts, it is interesting that it ended up that the Iberians, who are the Celts, do end up being Central European genetically. And I can show you quickly here. Figure number 2. We're going to open on a new tab. And as you can see here, this is Iron Age Portugal. But I've shown you from this paper that modern age Western Europeans, British, French, and Iberian, show genetic continuity from the Iron Age to modern day age. And so this being from the Iron Age, we can still interpret this as being from the modern age, because the DNA continued from the Iron Age to the modern age. And so these are Iron Age Portuguese, Southern Portuguese, and as you can see, they plot with Central Europeans of Central Eastern France, and also of Northern Austria and Southern Czechia, and also Central Germany. So that's with whom the Portuguese plot, and they plot away from Italians, as you can see. And these are Central Italians. They're not even Southern Italians. They're Central Italians. And these Southern Portuguese plot very far away from these Italians, from these Central Italians, and very, very close. They overlap with these Northern Alpine Central Europeans. So it is the fact that these Iberians, who are the Celts, according to the Vahadwu research, and then according to this paper that says the Hallstatt people, who we know to be the Celts, who we know to also be Celtic, were these Germany, Lech, and BA people who end up being the Iberians. But it shouldn't be so strange that the Celts end up being Iberians, because these Iberians are genetically Central Europeans. So what's going on? It's actually because they spread from the Bell Beaker Age, from the beginning of the Bronze Age in 2500 BC. That's why I was suggesting that you go over that paper, the Celto-Germanic paper, with the timeline there that I already put away. Here you go. Here's the timeline. This is the timeline that is most likely to have been the case. All right. And so ever since this 2500 BC, when the Bell Beaker spread from the Rhine region, so from that river that goes from the Netherlands down to Switzerland and then into Liechtenstein, when they spread from that region, ever since then, the Iberians have been this genetic Central European people. So that, because that's where they spread from. But because this continuity is all the way back to the Bronze Age, this didn't start in the 500 BC. This is another evidence against your model and for John T. Koch's model of spread from the Bronze Age, plus other scholars, of course. There's several other scholars who defend this model now. And John T. Koch is not the only one. But there's no more scholars who defend that the Celts actually spread in the Iron Age. So what you're reading is very outdated. And I just wanted to end with this, is that a lot of people get confused. They go, but what are the Iberians? Aren't the Iberians mixed with North Africans, blah, 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 which is something else that I'm going to cover later. But basically, no, they're not. And they're basically only genetically Central European. They don't have anything North African to them. And the North Africans, they're essentially a European people who came from Southern Europe, from Iberia into North Africa around 15,000 years ago. So these North Africans, even if they had, if they actually have any admixture with these Iberians, it's back migration. It's Iberians mixing with Iberians from 15,000 years ago. So that's why it doesn't make any difference. Whether they actually have some North African admixture, the Iberians, is immaterial because it doesn't move them away from their Central European position. So whatever they have is similar to a Central European composition already. So even if they have 10%, 20% North African, that North African is putting them together with Central Europeans, because of course North Africans came from Southern and Central Europe 15,000 years ago. Then they migrated through the Strait of Gibraltar into North Africa. That's why they're also Caucasoid people. They're also Caucasians. So it's a big red herring to try and think of Southwestern Europeans as different from Europe. We don't have to consider them. They're nobody from the ancient times. And no, they are the Celts that the Greeks and Romans were talking about. And to this day, they are still this Celtic bell beaker genetic pool together with Central Europeans. It just so happens that it's not from 500 BC. This is from 2500 BC. So they have been these genetic Central Europeans for 4,500 years now. And they're still separate from the Romans who conquered them, as you can see. So they did not become Romans. They're still these Central European Celts, but just not Hallstatt. Although the Hallstatt were Celts and they were Iberian in genetics, as I've shown you here, it's not because they were newly Celtic from only the late Bronze Age onwards. They were actually becoming Celtic from the bell beaker who ended up there. All right, from the bell beaker people who were of these places, Central Europe and Iberia, and so they all became they went from bell beaker and they became Celtic at the same time. But only these Portuguese and other Western Iberians called themselves Celts. The other peoples called themselves by other names, but not by Celts. All right. So I hope this makes sense. I hope it helps. And with this video, it's going to be the only one probably, because I've gone through all the videos that the study gym has made on the Celts. Hopefully, the study gym, you'll have an opportunity to watch these videos, the video that I've just made now, before you make another video with the sources that you're using, because again, they're very outdated. I would recommend that you read papers about them, but it's cool. I very much like Northwestern Europeans. I like that they are interested in learning about their past, and I would say that you should consider the Celts to be your bell beaker cousins. I'm going to tell you one thing. Let me go back. Let me go to another source that I have here. I'm going to show you what the people who called Southwestern European Celts actually called the your people, because it's not Fenian, it's not Hibernian. It's Galatians. So Strabo called these northern Gauls Galatians. He explains this here. I'll let you read this. But basically, he's talking about how the Celts only existed in Gaul and southern Gaul, and then everybody above them was Galatian. And then I can also show you Diodorus Siculus making the same point. Can I find this again, or? Let me see how I'm gonna find this. Here we go. He's saying that the peoples in the southern part of Gaul are called Celts, but the people above these Celts, all the way to Scythia, are known as Gauls. Again, there was no such thing as Gauls. This Gaul is a translation of Galatian. So we have both Siculus and Strabo calling these northern Gauls, Galatians. And again, according to this, which I will let you read, the northern samples of Gaul are close to the Great Britain population of modern day age, and the southern samples of Gaul are close to the Spanish population. Okay, so the people who were genetically your ancestors in Gaul, if you want to learn, they were called by Greco-Romans Galatians, and the Greco-Romans were very careful not to call your ancestors Celts. They were careful to say, no, Celts are only in southern Gaul. Both of them say that, okay? Celts are only in southern Gaul. The northern Gauls are Galatians, okay? So your people would have been called Galatian by the Greco-Romans that were calling southwestern Europeans Gauls, all right? So don't think that Celtic is the name about your culture or your people, because it's not. And there's a lot of people who want to sell you a book to convince you that you are indeed connected to these people who call themselves Celts, who were called Celts, but you're not. You're connected to these people who were called Galatians. Maybe they called themselves Galatians also. We have some evidence of that when they went to Turkey and then actually used that name Galatians for themselves there. But otherwise, Siculus and Strabo are telling us that these people in northern Gaul are the Galatians. And so, or at least were called Galatians by the Greeks and the Romans, and not Celts. And that paper Origins shows that the same people who were northern Gauls were also the Britons, all right? And so you can associate your name with the Galatians, but and your ancestors with the Galatians, but not with the Celts, because the Celts are these southwestern Europeans. And that's basically the extent of the material that I wanted to cover. I hope that you will take these in good stride, and that you won't think that I'm trying to be, I don't know, just people misinterpret, but I only have good and positive reasons to do that. I want more and more people to know who the Celts are, and especially because I so love Northwestern Europeans, I want you guys to understand that these Celts and Iberians, they are your cousins, culturally and genetically. Look at this. This is what we call a continuum. I'm looking at the A, but there's also the B here with more detail. But at the A plot, you can see as well as the B that all the way from northwestern Europe with the Scandinavians and also the British Islanders, there's a genetic continuum. We're all together through Central Europe down to Portugal. There's only a gap with the Alps. The Alps form a genetic gap and make Italy apart from us, apart from the British and the Spanish people together. But basically, this is a Central European spectrum. And you're right in that you should be naturally looking for a genetic original of the British in Central Europe. Not only because that's where the Saxons come from, but because that's where the Bell Beakers come from. And this is illustrated by Iron Age genetics and also modern genetics. So the point I want to make is that you're not too far from the Celts, but they're just not you and they're not your ancestors. They are the cousins of you and your ancestors, your southwestern cousins in southern Gaul, central Gaul even, and also all of Iberia, except of course the eastern part of Iberia, who had Iberians in them. But basically, the Celts are your cousins. And then the Romans are away from this entire Gaelic/Celtic spectrum. Or, if you want to call, Galatian/Celtic spectrum. Or British/Celtic. But the Celtic part is the southern part of the Central European genetic continuum, shared genetic drift. And the northern part of it, if anything, was called at least Galatian by the Greco-Romans. It was never called Celts. It was specifically not called Celts, and specifically had a non-Celtic word reserved for it. Not non-Celtic in terms of linguistically, but in terms of tribe. Strabo and Siculus made sure to say, no, these northern Gauls are not Celtic. They don't have Celts in them. There's not a people called Celtide there. there's only Galatians, what we call Galatians. So your people are associated with Galatians, not with Celts. And it's something that is changing now. Even the Celtic languages to represent Gaelic and Brythonic are nowadays being called insular languages and not Celtic languages at all, especially because they don't have a lot to do with the Celtic languages of the continent. But again, I've already covered that in another stream, and I don't want to make this stream too repetitive, but I wanted to show you these bits of information. Hopefully you will consider this and learn from it, and then hopefully even adapt your presentation to show more properly what the Celts were, if you want to continue talking about these Celts or as Southwestern Europeans, or if you want to continue talking about your ancestors, that you will properly refer to them by the names that they actually used. If not British or Hibernian, or at least Galatian, but certainly not Celtic, because they would not have gone by that name, Celtic. All right? And so with that, I will bid you farewell, my audience, and you, the Study Gym. Thank you very much for providing material for this presentation. And this has been the Kelt Show. Thank you all very much, and until next time.
But did they call themselves Celts?